The cold hit me first, even before the flashing blue and red lights cut through the pre-dawn gloom. Another call, another body, another puzzle waiting to be unpicked. My old sedan grumbled its protest as I pulled into the designated spot outside the imposing windowless edifice of Aether Dynamics. The name itself always struck me as a touch too grand, too self-important. I'd seen enough dynamics and solutions to know they usually meant more problems for someone like me. The exterior was all polished steel and dark, reflective glass, a monument to corporate ambition. Inside, however, was where the real work, and apparently the real trouble, brewed. I grabbed my kit, the familiar weight a small comfort, and pushed through the heavy access doors. A uniformed security officer, face pale and eyes wide, gestured me towards a lift. His silence was louder than any explanation. "What do we have?" I asked the detective waiting by the lift doors, his trench coat already showing the faint sheen of condensation from the chill inside. His name was Miller, if I remembered right, a solid by-the-book type. "Fall," Miller grunted, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Or so it looks. Employee found her just after 6, Dr. Lena Petrova. Brilliant bioengineer, apparently." "Where?" "Data center, level 3, nasty tumble." The lift hummed, a sterile ascent, before disgorging us into a labyrinth of corridors. Finally, Miller paused before a heavy, insulated door. Beyond it, the distinct thrum of machinery vibrated through the floor. He swiped a keycard, and the door hissed open. Rows upon rows of towering racks stretched into the distance, each housing hundreds of glowing, silent sentinels. The air was a constant, low roar of cooling fans, an industrial white noise that swallowed all other sounds. It was an environment designed for machines, not for the fragile human form. She lay crumpled at the base of one of the immense server racks, a slight figure dwarfed by the sheer scale of the technology surrounding her. A few scattered papers, some with complex schematics, lay near her outstretched hand, as if they'd been dropped mid-task. The posture suggested a sudden, uncontrolled descent. Her head was twisted at an unnatural angle, a telltale sign of severe neck trauma. I knelt, my breath pluming in the frigid air, and began my initial assessment. The uniform of the facility's internal security team had already cordoned off the immediate area with bright yellow tape. A forensic technician, a young man I vaguely recognized, was methodically photographing the scene, his flash momentarily illuminating the intricate wiring behind the server panels. I exchanged a brief nod with him, then turned my full attention to Dr. Petrova. Her lab coat, usually pristine, was rumpled and stained in places, but not with blood. Dust, mostly, and a faint, almost metallic sheen I couldn't immediately identify. Her glasses lay several feet away, one lens cracked, the frames bent. The scene painted a clear picture of a fall from a significant height, perhaps while reaching for something on an upper shelf or losing her footing on a maintenance ladder. The server racks themselves were easily 10 feet tall, and a fall from that height onto a hard floor would certainly be fatal. I scanned the surrounding area, taking in every detail. The servers hummed, their diagnostic LEDs a silent symphony of green and amber. Nothing seemed disturbed, no signs of forced entry, no struggle. It was all very neat, very clinical, very much in line with an unfortunate accident. My initial impression was that Miller's assessment was likely correct. Then I saw it. It was almost imperceptible, hidden in the folds of her left sleeve near the cuff. A small tear, no bigger than my thumbnail in the fabric of her lab coat. It wasn't a rip consistent with snagging on a jagged edge during a fall. This was different. The edges of the tear were too clean, too precise, almost like a puncture, but then it had been dragged, tearing the fabric further. And beneath the tear, on the skin of her forearm, a faint, linear abrasion. It was thin, barely visible against her pale skin, a mere suggestion of a wound. My gaze flickered from the tear to the abrasion, then back to the immaculate, unforgiving environment of the data center. There were no obvious sharp protrusions on the server racks at that height, nothing that would cause such a specific, almost surgical-looking tear and corresponding abrasion. A fall would typically result in more widespread contusions, larger tears from impact, or a more ragged tearing if she'd scraped against something. This was too focused, too deliberate-looking. I straightened up slowly, my mind already sifting through possibilities, discarding the easy explanations. Miller, still standing a few feet away, watched me, his expression unreadable. "Anything, Dean?" he asked, his voice low, almost swallowed by the server hum. I didn't answer immediately. My eyes traced the path her body should have taken if it was a simple fall. The way she landed, the scattering of the papers, it all made sense. But that tear, that faint abrasion, they didn't. A knot tightened in my gut. The case, which had initially presented itself as a tragic accident, was now beginning to fray at the edges. Lena Petrova had fallen, yes, but I was suddenly very sure that her fall had not been silent, nor entirely accidental. The silent fall, as Miller called it, was already screaming at me with a tiny damning detail. Miller's hand, gloved and sterile, swept a sensor across the heavy insulated door. A soft chime, then a pneumatic hiss, and the seal broke. The door slid open with a whisper, revealing an interior colder than the corridor outside. This wasn't a typical examination room. It was a dedicated processing unit, all stainless steel and gleaming specialized equipment humming with a low, constant thrum. The air, though filtered, carried a faint, clinical scent, a mix of ozone and something metallic. "He's ready, Dean," Miller said, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. I stepped inside, the chill immediately seeping through my thin underscrubs. The room was brightly lit, a stark contrast to the muted corridors. In the center, on a polished steel table, lay the subject, Lena. Her features were composed, almost serene, a stark counterpoint to the violent end she'd met. I donned my own gloves, a fresh mask, and safety glasses. The familiar ritual, a small anchor in the unsettling environment. My gaze swept over her. The official report cited a fall from a significant height, an accident. My job was to confirm or refute that narrative. "Let's begin," I murmured, more to myself than to Miller, who was already preparing the imaging equipment. The macroscopic examination began methodically. I dictated my observations into a voice recorder, detailing every contusion, every abrasion, every fracture. The impact injuries were severe, consistent with a rapid deceleration event. Rib fractures, a crushed sternum, extensive internal hemorrhaging. Her left leg was unnaturally angled, a compound fracture clearly visible beneath the torn fabric of her trousers. The head trauma was devastating. A stellate fracture pattern on the parietal bone, indicative of a blunt force impact. No defensive wounds on the forearms or hands, I noted, my fingers gently probing her skin. No signs of struggle. Miller adjusted a camera arm, capturing a high-resolution image of a particularly nasty laceration on her temple. "Fits the fall scenario," he stated, his voice a disembodied presence behind his mask. I nodded, my internal monologue already running through the possibilities. The injuries did align with a fall. A tragic, accidental fall. Accidents in high-security research facilities were rarely simple. I moved systematically, examining her clothing, her fingernails, the soles of her shoes. Nothing immediately stood out. No foreign fibers, no unusual residues visible to the naked eye. The scene photos I'd reviewed showed a relatively clean impact site, concrete and scattered debris, but nothing that suggested a struggle or an external influence. The internal examination confirmed the extensive trauma. Ruptured organs, massive blood loss. The sheer force of the impact had ravaged her body. As I worked, collecting tissue samples, I felt the familiar detachment, the mental wall that allowed me to perform my duty. But beneath it, a current of unease persisted. It was the absence of anything more that was unsettling. Hours passed. The hum of the equipment, the click of the camera, the quiet rustle of my movements were the only sounds. Finally, I concluded the gross examination, bagging and labeling every sample, every piece of evidence. "Microscopic next," I announced, peeling off my gloves. "I'll take the skin swabs and respiratory samples to the internal analysis unit." Miller merely grunted, already starting the laborious process of cleaning the examination table. I moved to a smaller adjacent room, a dedicated lab space within the facility. Under the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights, I prepared slides from the epidermal swabs taken from Lena's exposed skin, particularly around the hairline and neck, and from the tracheal and bronchial washings. I mounted them, stained them, and then positioned the first slide under the eyepiece of the high-powered microscope. The initial view was unremarkable. Epithelial cells, some cellular debris, traces of environmental dust consistent with the scene. I methodically scanned, my eyes trained for anything out of place. And then, there it was. A cluster of minute particles, almost crystalline in structure, glinting faintly under the focused light. They were too uniform, too angular to be biological, too pristine to be typical dust. I zoomed in, adjusting the focus. These weren't natural. They possessed an iridescent quality, a subtle shimmer of blue and green at their edges that defied easy categorization. They were embedded in the superficial layers of her skin, almost like fine glitter. My gaze moved to the respiratory samples. A few more of the same particles, trapped within the mucus lining of her trachea. They were tiny, barely visible even at high magnification, yet undeniably present. My breath hitched. This was something engineered, something synthetic. The official narrative was starting to unravel. I pulled back from the eyepiece, my mind racing. Where could these have come from? Not from the concrete, not from the simple mechanics of a fall. This facility was a research hub, a place of advanced materials and cutting-edge technologies. Leaving the samples secure, I stepped out of the lab, a new sense of urgency driving me. I needed to see more of this place. I needed context. My thoughts turned to the sterile, climate-controlled environments I'd glimpsed on the way in. I remembered the heavy doors, the specialized air filtration. I found a technician, a young man with a perpetually anxious expression hunched over a console. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "I need to observe the environmental conditions in some of your specialized zones. Specifically, areas with highly controlled atmospheres or unique particulate matter." The technician blinked, clearly unnerved by my presence. "Which zones, sir?" "Anywhere with non-standard atmospheric composition. For example, your server farms. Are they open to observation?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "There are protocols, but I can..." The hum here was louder, a deep, pervasive thrum that resonated in my chest. The air was frigid, almost painful to breathe, and tasted faintly of ozone. I swept my gaze over the polished floors, the gleaming metal, the silent, powerful machines. This entire facility was a controlled environment, a sealed ecosystem of its own. And I was just beginning to listen. The hum here was louder, a deep, pervasive thrum that resonated not just in my ears, but in the very bones of my skull. It was a mechanical heartbeat, relentless and sterile. Each blink represented untold data, untold secrets. The air, already cold from the preceding corridors, felt even colder here, dry enough to crack the skin. I could almost taste the static electricity. The facility's security chief, a man whose tailored suit seemed too formal for the cavernous humming space, gestured vaguely down the aisle. "This is where he was found, Dean. Just past that fourth server bank, the impact site." I walked slowly, my footsteps muffled by the industrial-grade flooring, the only sound apart from the omnipresent thrum. It was a landscape of pure function, devoid of anything organic, anything human. Yet, A human life had ended here. Lena's life. No witnesses, of course, the security chief added, his voice flat, devoid of real inflection. Automated surveillance only. The cameras show her walking alone, then the fall. I stopped at the designated spot. There was nothing left but a faint, almost imperceptible scuff mark on the polished floor, meticulously cleaned. But I wasn't looking for obvious signs. I was looking for what was missing, what had been deliberately erased or overlooked. I knelt, pulling a small, powerful flashlight from my kit. The beam cut through the subtle ambient light, revealing dust motes dancing in the frigid air. I ran a gloved finger along the base of a server rack, then along the floor seam. Nothing obvious. Too clean. That was the first red flag. My mind replayed the initial examination of Lena's body. The specific fractures, the internal hemorrhaging, the residue on her clothing. My instincts screamed that it wasn't a simple fall. Simple falls didn't leave behind a metallic sheen that shimmered with an unnatural iridescence. The air here was controlled, filtered, but it carried the faint, familiar scent of reagents and sterilized steel. My lead technician, a methodical individual with an almost surgical precision in his movements, was already preparing the samples. The residue from the victim's lab coat, I instructed, placing the sealed evidence bag on the stainless steel table. High-resolution spectral analysis. I want to know everything about its composition. And cross-reference against known industrial compounds, proprietary materials, anything that comes up. He nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration as he carefully extracted a microscopic fleck of the shimmering material. Under the powerful lens of the electron microscope, the residue looked like a cluster of alien crystals, catching and refracting the light. I watched the live feed on the monitor, my eyes tracing the intricate, almost organic patterns within the inorganic structure. It wasn't just a metallic dust. It was something engineered, something complex. Hours blurred into a focused trance. The lead technician worked tirelessly, running the sample through various spectroscopic techniques. The data scrolled across his secondary monitor. Peaks and valleys on graphs, elemental percentages, molecular structures. Finally, a series of matches began to appear, not in the general industrial databases, but in a highly specialized one, often reserved for cutting-edge material science. "Dean," the lead technician called, his voice tight with discovery. "Look at this. The spectral signature is a near-perfect match. It's a proprietary compound, an advanced polymer with a metallic nanofiber matrix, developed for extreme environmental resilience and electromagnetic shielding." He paused, then scrolled down further. "The patent holder, Aether Dynamics." Aether Dynamics, the very corporation that owned the facility where Lena had died. My jaw tightened. A simple fall leaving behind trace evidence of their own highly advanced proprietary material. The coincidence was too precise, too convenient. This wasn't just a random contaminant. This was a signature. "Now, the lab coat," I said, turning my attention to the pristine white garment, carefully laid out on a clean, sterile sheet. It had been collected from the scene and packaged with meticulous care. I donned a fresh pair of magnification goggles, picking up a pair of fine-tipped forceps. My fingers, accustomed to such delicate work, began to systematically inspect every inch of the fabric, starting from the shoulders, working my way down. The fabric was standard issue, durable but not exceptionally thick. I scrutinized the collar, the cuffs, the front panels. Nothing. Then, near the left shoulder blade, an area that would have been protected by the fall itself, I noticed it. A minute disruption in the weave, almost invisible to the naked eye, even under the bright examination lights. I adjusted the focus of my goggles, bringing the tiny imperfection into sharp relief. It wasn't a snag from a rough surface, nor a tear from impact with the floor. The fibers were pulled, but in a way that suggested a specific kind of force. A small, almost surgical incision, about 1/4 of an inch long, with a slight outward fraying, It was inconsistent with the trajectory of a fall, inconsistent with impact damage. It looked like something had caught, or been caught, by the fabric. Something sharp, but not necessarily heavy or large. My mind raced. A fall, even a severe one, would typically cause tearing consistent with blunt force or stretching from impact. This was different. This suggested a struggle, a deliberate act. An external force, perhaps a tool, a sharp edge, or even a fingernail applied with specific pressure. I leaned back, pulling off the goggles. The image of that tiny, almost invisible tear burned into my vision. The proprietary compound, the precise and anomalous tear in the fabric. The accident narrative was unraveling, thread by painstaking thread. The fabric of deception, it seemed, was beginning to show its flaws. Null, a signal. My jaw tightened, the thought solidifying into a grim certainty. This wasn't just a random contaminant. This was a signature, a proprietary fingerprint left behind at the scene of a death they were so eager to label accidental. The implications chilled me, but also sharpened my focus. Lena's death, originally presented as a tragic fall, now screamed premeditated malice. I spent the next 2 days immersed in the minutiae, cross-referencing every detail. The trace material, microscopic fibers, nanoparticles barely visible even under the electron microscope, all linked definitively to Aether Dynamics' patented manufacturing processes. Their official statement about the material being used exclusively in controlled research environments only underscored the damning nature of its presence at the facility's lower levels, far from any designated lab. I meticulously documented the inconsistencies. The lack of defensive wounds, the specific angle of impact on Lena's skull, inconsistent with a simple tumble, and the peculiar absence of other expected debris at the fall site. It was as if the scene had been fastidiously cleaned, save for the one critical piece of evidence. The meeting with the lead detective was scheduled for late afternoon. I arrived at the precinct, my briefcase heavy with reports, slides, and magnified images. The detective, a woman with sharp, observant eyes and a demeanor that suggested little patience for conjecture, greeted me in a small, utilitarian conference room. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the polished table. "Dean," he acknowledged, gesturing to a chair. "You said you had something new regarding the Lena Petrova case?" "Yes, Detective," I began, placing my materials on the table. "Significant new findings, I believe. They compel a re-evaluation of the cause and manner of death." I laid out the photographic evidence first. The pristine fall site, then the magnified images of the Aether Dynamics material. I explained the forensic analysis, detailing the unique composition and the rigorous process by which it was identified. "This material," I stated, pointing to a particularly clear electron micrograph, "is proprietary to Aether Dynamics. Their own internal documents, which I've cross-referenced, confirm its exclusive use within their high-security research divisions." The detective leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "And its presence at the fall site? Highly improbable for an accidental contamination," I asserted, "especially given its distribution. It wasn't scattered randomly. It was concentrated, almost as if it had been transferred from a specific source directly onto Lena's person, and then subsequently dislodged at the point of impact." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Coupled with the absence of other expected trauma, the very specific nature of the head injury, and the unnaturally clean environment, I believe we are looking at a staged scene, Detective, not an accident. Her gaze sharpened, moving from the images to my face. She picked up one of the reports, scanning the technical jargon. "You're saying this was no accident. You're saying it was deliberate." "Yes," I confirmed, meeting her gaze steadily. "My professional opinion is that Lena Petrova's death was a homicide. The evidence points to a deliberate act, followed by an attempt to obscure the true nature of the event." A long silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of the lights. The detective closed the file, her jaw working subtly. Homicide, she murmured, the word carrying the weight of its implication. That changes everything. She pushed herself up from the table. All right, Dean, this is substantial. I'll reclassify the case immediately. We'll need to secure the facility and initiate a full homicide investigation. The shift in the official classification was swift, like a tectonic plate grinding into motion. Calls were made, teams mobilized. But as quickly as the investigative gears began to turn, they met an unexpected resistance. Aether Dynamics, initially forthcoming and cooperative during the accidental death phase, suddenly became an impenetrable fortress. Our requests for further access to the facility were met with polite but firm denials. Subsequent attempts to interview key personnel were stonewalled. Scheduled appointments canceled last minute. Official statements replaced by evasive non-answers from their legal department. Information that had previously flowed freely now trickled at a glacial pace, heavily redacted, or simply vanished. My own follow-up queries about specific research projects or personnel records were met with a wall of corporate speak, citing proprietary information and ongoing internal reviews. I felt the first chill of it then, the cold, calculated resistance of a powerful entity. It wasn't just bureaucracy. It was a deliberate strategy, a closing of ranks. They weren't just uncooperative. They were actively obstructing. It was a clear signal that something far more insidious than a simple cover-up of an accident was at play. My frustration mounted. Every avenue seemed to lead back to a locked door, a blank stare, or a dead end. If the physical evidence was being hidden, perhaps the digital trail could offer a new path. I was trying to access publicly filed corporate records for Aether Dynamics, looking for any anomaly, any hidden partnership, any financial transaction that might shed light on their sudden hostility. But even here, in the digital realm, the data felt curated, sanitized, a deliberate smokescreen. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming, yet I knew the crucial pieces were missing, deliberately withheld. I had changed the classification of a death, but in doing so, I had merely peeled back the first layer of a much larger, more dangerous truth. The Aether Dynamics Corporation wasn't merely uncooperative. They were obstructing, stonewalling with an almost elegant precision. My lab, usually a sanctuary of methodical inquiry, felt suddenly like a vulnerable outpost. I couldn't rely on official channels anymore, not when the official channels themselves seemed compromised. My next move had to be surgical, outside the glare of corporate scrutiny. I needed data, the kind that wasn't handed over willingly. A former colleague, now working in a less than above board capacity for a digital forensics firm, owed me a significant favor. It involved a particularly sensitive data recovery case years ago, the details of which we both preferred to forget. I made the call, the secure line crackling with an almost conspiratorial static. "Dean," the colleague's voice was gravelly. "You only call when the dead speak volumes." "And this one," I replied, staring at the autopsy report on my screen, "is screaming." I laid out my predicament, the wall of silence from Aether Dynamics, the unsettling inconsistencies in the incident report. I needed access, not to their live systems, but to their historical employee records, their incident logs, anything that might have slipped through the cracks of a hasty cover-up. I stressed the urgency, the feeling that time was a luxury I couldn't afford. The colleague was quiet for a long moment. "Aether Dynamics is a big fish, Dean. Connected. This isn't a quick dive." "I'm not asking for quick," I countered. "I'm asking for deep." A sigh, then a reluctant acceptance. "There's an access point, an old, forgotten server farm they use for long-term archiving. It's off the main grid, physically isolated. Think of it as a digital graveyard. I can get you in for a few hours." The address led me to a windowless concrete monolith, its exterior devoid of any identifying marks. The colleague's instructions were precise. A service entrance, a hidden keypad, a sequence of numbers only known to a select few. The heavy steel door hissed open, revealing a short, dark corridor. Inside, the hum intensified, morphing into a pervasive thrum that resonated in my chest. The air was frigid, dry, tasting faintly of ozone. I stepped into the heart of the facility, a vast, echoing space filled with towering racks of machinery. My breath plumed in the glacial air. My colleague had prepped a workstation for me, a terminal already logged into a deep-dive archival system. The interface was clunky, designed for long-forgotten data retrieval, not quick searches. I began with the most recent incident, the accidental death that had landed on my table. From there, I started to expand my search, looking for keywords. Incident, accident, medical leave, resignation under duress, unexplained absence. I focused on employees who had worked on the specific classified project I'd gleaned from the victim's limited work ID. Hours blurred. My fingers grew numb on the keyboard. My eyes burned from the relentless glow of the screen. The initial results were sparse, easily dismissed as isolated events. But I kept digging, cross-referencing names, dates, project codes. Then a faint pattern began to emerge. Listed as having suffered a fatal fall from a hiking trail 2 years prior. The incident report was brief, almost perfunctory. No further investigation. Then, a technician, a year before that, a boating accident on a calm lake. No lingering questions, no internal reviews beyond the bare minimum. My forensic data from the recent victim, the unique biological markers, the specific tissue degradation, the precise, almost surgical nature of the internal trauma. It didn't align with a simple accident. And it certainly didn't align with a fall from a hiking trail or a boating mishap. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern, a systemic issue. These weren't accidents. They were meticulously orchestrated disappearances and deaths, designed to look like anything but foul play. The sheer audacity of it, hidden in plain sight within the company's own archives. My initial victim was just the latest in a line, a data point in a grim historical trend. The resistance I'd met wasn't just about protecting a single secret. It was about protecting a legacy of secrets, a string of human lives extinguished to keep a project under wraps. The implications were staggering. If Aether Dynamics was willing to go to such lengths, what would they do to someone actively digging into their past? My determination hardened, but a new, acute awareness of the danger settled heavy in my gut. I wasn't just investigating a death anymore. I was unearthing a graveyard. And the entity responsible for it was still very much alive and very much aware. The pattern had been a quiet hum in the background of my thoughts, a discordant note in the symphony of routine fatalities. 3 Aether Dynamics employees, all dead under unusual circumstances, all ruled accidental, all with an unnerving lack of conventional evidence. The junior researcher's fall, the technician's boating mishap, the unstated third incident that had been cut short in the previous file. It felt less like coincidence and more like a carefully edited manuscript. I'd spent the last 48 hours re-examining every shred of data from the initial facility death, juxtaposing it with the sparse details of these earlier cases. The silence from Aether Dynamics had been deafening, their official statements polite but unhelpful. My gut churned with a familiar unease, the kind that precedes a storm. Then the message arrived. It wasn't an email to my official address, nor a package through the mailroom. It materialized in a secure, encrypted messaging app I maintained for highly sensitive, off-the-books communications, a relic from a case years ago that had taught me the value of discretion. The sender was anonymous, the subject line a string of alphanumeric characters. My fingers hesitated over the interface for a moment, a flicker of caution. This could be a trap, a misdirection. But the timing, following my deep dive into the Aether deaths, felt too precise to ignore. I opened the message. It contained a single, heavily encrypted attachment and a brief, stark message. They're covering up more than just a leak. Check Project Chimera. The cleaner compound leaves nothing. My breath hitched. Cleaner compound. That phrase resonated with the unnerving absence of biological markers I'd been wrestling with. I knew this wasn't something I could process on my work network. The secure app was one thing, but decrypting potentially explosive corporate secrets required an environment utterly devoid of digital fingerprints. I moved. My destination was an old, nondescript building on the city's outskirts, a place known only to a handful of trusted contacts as a secure data analysis hub. It was a relic from the early days of digital forensics, maintained for just such contingencies. The air outside was damp and cool, the streetlights casting long, distorted shadows as I navigated the back alleys. The building itself was unassuming, a concrete box with reinforced doors and no exterior signage. Inside, the silence was profound, broken only by the low, steady hum of machinery. I bypassed the main analysis rooms and went deeper, following a narrow corridor that twisted through the building's core. The space was a labyrinth of metal racks, each housing stacks of gleaming server units. Indicator lights, a multitude of greens and yellows, pulsed in a silent, rhythmic dance. The air conditioning units roared softly, maintaining a frigid temperature necessary for the hardware. This was where the most sensitive data lived, isolated from external networks, protected by layers of physical and digital security. I set up my portable decryption rig, connecting it to one of the isolated terminals. The familiar click of keys filled the sterile air as I initiated the complex process. The decryption took time, each percentage point feeling like an eternity. My gaze drifted over the rows of blinking lights, the silent sentinels of information. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Project Chimera, a cleaner compound, the missing evidence. It all pointed to something far more sinister than corporate espionage. This hinted at deliberate elimination, not just of evidence, but of people. When the progress bar finally hit 100%, a new folder appeared on the screen. I clicked it open, a knot tightening in my stomach. The files were a chaotic mix of internal memos, redacted scientific papers, communication logs, and financial records. It was a digital archive, dumped unceremoniously, but with enough context to be devastating. This wasn't drug research, nor agricultural advancement. This was about weaponizing biology. Then I found it. A series of internal reports detailing the development of Compound X7, described as a rapid-acting biological degradation agent. The reports outlined its efficacy in neutralizing organic signatures and its minimal residual footprint. One document, an internal risk assessment, highlighted its potential for total environmental remediation of biological contaminants. In layman's terms, it was designed to erase any trace of organic material, including human tissue. It was the ultimate cleaner, a ghost maker. My breath caught in my throat. The lack of conventional evidence in the deaths, the sterile crime scenes, the almost too clean nature of the fatalities. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. They weren't just covering up an accident. They were actively erasing their mistakes, using a compound that could make a body vanish, leaving behind nothing for a forensic pathologist to find. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just malfeasance. It was murder, systematically executed and meticulously covered up. They were covering up a secret bioweapons program, and they were willing to eliminate anyone who stood in their way, using a compound designed to leave no trace. My own investigation had just become infinitely more dangerous. The blinking lights of the servers seemed to mock me, their silent hum a prelude to a storm I was now irrevocably caught in. The thought of cleaner compound had lodged itself in my mind like a shard of ice, demanding immediate, isolated attention. It needed a fortress of digital silence, a place where even stray electromagnetic whispers felt alien. I slipped past the biometric scanner, the heavy door hissing shut behind me. The sudden drop in temperature was a physical shock, raising goosebumps on my arms. The air, filtered to an almost pathological purity, smelled faintly of ozone and static. This was the nerve center, the digital heart of the facility, and ironically, the safest place for me to operate in plain sight. No one questioned a forensic pathologist working late in the data center, not when they knew I was simply checking data integrity for my reports. It was a flimsy cover, but it had worked so far. Perfect. My own tablet, a bespoke piece of hardware with layers of encryption only I understood, felt like a warm stone in my gloved hand. I connected it to a power port, bypassing any network access, ensuring it remained an island. My fingers, usually steady, felt a tremor as I initiated the decryption sequence. Lines of code scrolled down the screen, a blur of characters that slowly, agonizingly resolved into readable text. I focused on keywords: denaturing agents, biological degradation, selective targeting. It took nearly an hour, hunched over the glowing screen, my breath misting in the frigid air before I found it. A research paper, buried deep within a folder labeled Project Chimera, detailed a synthetic compound. They called it Viridian-7. The document described its primary function: an ultra-efficient, broad-spectrum denaturing agent, capable of breaking down organic matter with unprecedented speed and leaving virtually no residue. Viridian-7, while potent, could be made exponentially more effective with a specific enzymatic catalyst. My mind raced back to Lena's tissue samples. The unusual patterns of degradation, the inexplicable absence of certain cellular structures, yet the presence of others. I had dismissed some trace elements as environmental contaminants, statistical noise. Now I felt a prickle of unease, a gnawing certainty that I had missed something crucial. I accessed my own secure server, cross-referencing my previous findings with the information now flickering on my screen. I filtered the results of Lena's post-mortem analysis, looking for anomalies, for anything that didn't fit the profile of a simple chemical burn. And there it was, a specific enzyme, previously unidentifiable, present in minute quantities in the deepest layers of Lena's pulmonary tissue and epidermal cells, yet absent from the surrounding environment. It was rare, almost unheard of in human biology, and I had flagged it as an outlier, an unknown. The document in Project Chimera described it: Enzyme X27, a genetically engineered catalyst designed to accelerate the denaturing action of Viridian-7, making its effect precise and devastating, but crucially, localized. It was engineered to break down proteins and nucleic acids, turning cellular structures into an inert sludge, leaving behind only the most resilient components. And it was designed to degrade rapidly itself, leaving minimal trace after its work was done. The pieces slammed together with brutal force. Lena's death wasn't an accident. The cleaner compound wasn't just for cleaning up a spill. It was the weapon itself, delivered with surgical precision. The synthetic residue I found, the lack of biological markers, the unusual degradation patterns, it all pointed to Viridian-7 activated by enzyme X27. It wasn't about erasing evidence after an accident. It was about creating an accident that erased itself. A targeted, sophisticated assassination designed to look like a workplace mishap. The sheer premeditation of it settled in my gut like a lead weight. Someone had wanted Lena gone, and they had deployed a cutting-edge bioweapon, disguised as an industrial cleaner to achieve it. I had the enzyme. I had the compound. And now I had proof of a murder cloaked in the guise of an unforeseen tragedy. My hands, still hovering over the glowing screen, felt suddenly heavy. The hum of the servers, once a comforting drone, now sounded like a silent accusation. I was holding the truth, and it was terrifying. An ultra-potent neurotoxin designed for rapid onset and complete cellular degradation. My breath hitched, a faint cloud in the frigid air of the server room. The words on the screen solidified the dread I'd been fighting. Viridian-7. It was a synthetic compound, detailed with chilling precision. Colorless, odorless, undetectable by standard forensic toxicology panels. Its mechanism of action described a swift, irreversible breakdown of cellular integrity, leaving behind only an innocuous residue. A residue that could easily be mistaken for natural decomposition, or, in the right environment, the byproduct of a faulty piece of equipment. The victim's accelerated decay, the lack of external trauma, the perplexing absence of traditional toxins. It all clicked into place with a horrifying finality. This wasn't an accident. It was a meticulously orchestrated killing, and the evidence had been designed to vanish. Project Chimera wasn't just research. It was a blueprint for silent elimination. I needed to verify this. Cross-reference the compound's structure with any known bioweapons, any obscure patents. The facility's secure network, which I had gained access to with a colleague's temporary override, felt suddenly less secure. Every keystroke felt like an echo in the vast, silent room. I worked through the night, the glow of the monitor reflecting in my tired eyes. Dawn painted the sky a muted gray by the time I finally leaned back, my neck aching. There was no direct match in public databases. Viridian 7 was a ghost, existing only within Aether Dynamics' proprietary research. My stomach churned with a mixture of vindication and profound unease. I had found the needle in the haystack, but that needle was designed to pierce and vanish without a trace. The first tremor of obstruction came that afternoon. My superior, the facility administrator, called me into his office. He sat behind a gleaming mahogany desk, his expression carefully neutral. Concerns. Your recent expenditures on this current investigation, the unconventional methods you're employing, they're raising questions. I met his gaze. I'm following the evidence, sir. It's leading me in a direction we didn't anticipate. He steepled his fingers. Evidence, yes, but at what cost? We're under immense pressure from Aether Dynamics. Their legal team has been particularly vocal about the implications of your inquiries. He didn't explicitly forbid me from continuing, but the message was clear. My funding, my position, everything was suddenly vulnerable. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken threats. Later that day, I tried to follow up on one of the co-authors listed on the Viridian 7 paper, a junior researcher, a chemical engineer named Dr. Aris Thorne. His internal contact number simply rang unanswered. I tried his external number, then his email. Nothing. I walked down to the research wing, to the lab number listed on his profile. A quick query to the security desk revealed his access badge had been deactivated 2 days prior. Relocated, the security officer stated flatly without elaboration. Key witness gone. Just like that. The true weight of Aether Dynamics' influence crashed down on me the following morning. A lean, impeccably dressed woman from the facility's legal department appeared at my lab door, flanked by a sharper-suited man I didn't recognize. Dean, the facility's legal counsel began, his voice crisp. This is Mr. Albright. He's representing Aether Dynamics. Mr. Albright stepped forward, his presence radiating a controlled menace. We are here to formally inform you that your activities are interfering with Aether Dynamics' proprietary research and development. We have reason to believe you have illegally accessed confidential information. This constitutes corporate espionage. He slid a thick envelope across my workbench. A cease and desist order, effective immediately. Any further investigation into this matter will be met with severe legal repercussions. Your funding will be frozen, and your professional conduct will be reviewed by the appropriate authorities. His eyes flickered to the microscopic slides on my bench, then back to me. You understand the implications for your career, I presume? My jaw tightened. I understood. They weren't just threatening me. They were trying to dismantle my entire professional life. We'd like to have a more private conversation, Mr. Albright continued, his voice deceptively smooth. A place where we can ensure indicator lights, 1,000 tiny green and amber eyes, blinked in hypnotic synchronicity, casting an ethereal glow on the polished concrete floor. The sheer scale of the digital fortress was overwhelming. a stark reminder of the colossal infrastructure at Aether Dynamics command. Mr. Albright stopped between two towering server racks, the faint whirring of cooling fans the only sound. The air smelled faintly of ozone and dust. He turned, his gaze unwavering. This is where their world lives, Dean, and they protect it with absolute ruthlessness. His voice dropped, barely audible above the hum. You're digging into something far larger than a single unfortunate incident. You're threatening the very foundation of their enterprise. They have resources you can't comprehend. Influence that reaches every corner of this city and beyond. Think very carefully about your next move. Because if you continue, you won't just lose your job. He wasn't just threatening me. He was showing me the true scale of the adversary. And I, Dean, was just one man with a microscope standing against it. But looking at the endless blinking lights, I felt a resolve harden within me. They had underestimated my stubbornness. The air was frigid, a calculated chill designed to preserve the digital brains of Aether Dynamics. It was here, amidst their fortress of data, that I had chosen to face them. His face, usually a mask of corporate geniality, was now etched with a brittle displeasure. Beside him, the lead scientist, his spectacles glinting in the faint green glow of an indicator light, shifted his weight, his gaze darting between me and the CEO. You have no jurisdiction here, and certainly no right to demand this. Audience. I held up a secure tablet, its screen displaying a dense array of data logs and forensic images. Irregular, perhaps. Necessary, absolutely. I'm not here for jurisdiction. I'm here for justice. For Lena. The lead scientist flinched almost imperceptibly at Lena's name. The CEO, however, merely narrowed his eyes. Lena's death was a tragic accident. And you thought you could bury Lena's truth just as deeply. I tapped the tablet, bringing up the first image. A microscopic view of cellular degradation unlike anything seen in a typical industrial accident. Lena didn't die from a fall or a chemical spill. She died from exposure to a highly potent, fast-acting bioweapon. A compound designed to replicate the symptoms of a hemorrhagic fever, but with an accelerated necrotic effect. The lead scientist's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. Let me save you the trouble, Professor. I know you developed it. I have the schematics, the testing logs, the internal memos. All leaked, of course. This is corporate espionage. You're breaking every law in the book. And you're breaking one much more fundamental, I countered, leaning forward slightly. My gaze locking onto his. The one against murder. I advanced another step, the only sound the relentless whirring of the cooling fans. The bioweapon was designed to dissolve cellular structures rapidly, leaving minimal trace. But it wasn't enough, was it? Lena was too resilient. Perhaps the dose wasn't quite perfect. I swiped the tablet screen. So, you deployed your cleaner. A secondary compound, meant to eradicate any remaining traces of the bioweapon and accelerate the decomposition, making it look like a prolonged post-mortem decay, consistent with a body left undiscovered for days. I brought up a new image, a spectral analysis graph, vibrant with peaks and troughs. This is the signature of your cleaner compound? It's unique. A complex organic solvent, engineered to target specific protein structures left by the bioweapon. I found trace residues in Lena's bone marrow, protected by the density of the bone itself. A microscopic amount, but enough. Its molecular fingerprint is unmistakable, like a chemical barcode. The lead scientist finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Impossible. The compound is designed for complete degradation. No residue. Almost complete, I corrected, my voice unwavering. But not quite. You underestimated the robustness of human bone, or perhaps you didn't account for the rapid onset of death preventing full systemic distribution. A fraction of a milligram, Professor. That's all it took for me to unravel your entire charade. I showed them a side-by-side comparison. the leaked internal document detailing the cleaner compound structure, and my own lab's mass spectrometry results. The patterns were identical. You couldn't risk her going public, so you eliminated her, then moved her body to the manufacturing floor to stage the accident. The fall, the supposed chemical burns, all meticulously planned to obscure the truth. The CEO was pale, his earlier bluster having evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror. The lead scientist looked like a man watching his life's work crumble before his eyes. He averted his gaze, unable to meet mine. The leaked data, I pressed on, my voice rising slightly above the hum, includes communications between you two, discussing containment protocols and asset neutralization in the days leading up to Lena's death. It even details the exact batch number of the bioweapon used in the subsequent deployment of the cleaner agent. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. You thought you were untouchable, protected by layers of corporate secrecy and the sheer complexity of your research. But the truth, like a persistent pathogen, always finds a way out. And I found it right here, in the microscopic details of Lena's remains. This isn't just a corporate malfeasance. I held the tablet aloft, the screen glowing, a beacon of undeniable truth in the chilling heart of their digital fortress. The world is about to hear Lena's story, and yours. The corporate executive's face, usually a mask of polished indifference, fractured. A flicker of genuine panic, raw and unadorned, broke through. He glanced at the head of security, a silent command passing between them, a desperate plea for a solution that didn't exist. The air, usually crisp and sterile, felt heavy, charged with the weight of impending exposure. You don't understand the implications, the corporate executive finally managed. The evidence on that tablet was damning. Encrypted files detailing Project Chimera, the accelerated pathogen research, the deliberate sabotage that led to Lena's death, all disguised as an accident. It was all there, meticulously recovered from the facility's secure network. I had spent days sifting through digital debris, reconstructing the timeline, piecing together the fragmented lies until the horrific truth emerged. My finger hovered over the upload icon. It's already timed. If I don't confirm my safety in the next 10 minutes, it goes live anyway. To every major news outlet, every regulatory body, every human rights organization I could find. A bluff? Perhaps. But the doubt in their eyes was all I needed. Before either of them could respond, a new voice cut through the sterile air. Drop it, gentlemen. The corporate executive paled further, his eyes darting wildly, a cornered animal realizing its trap. I lowered the tablet, the screen still glowing, and offered it to the investigating officer. It's all here, everything you need. The ensuing hours were a blur of flashing lights, hushed commands, and the methodical dismantling of Aether Dynamics' carefully constructed facade. The corporate executive and the head of security were cuffed, led away through the labyrinthine corridors, their expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to simmering rage. I watched them go, feeling no triumph, only a profound exhaustion. Lena's justice was finally in motion, but the cost felt immense. The next morning, the world exploded. The story of Aether Dynamics' illicit bioweapons research, the cover-up, and Lena's murder dominated every headline. My phone became a relentless buzzing entity, a constant reminder of the media storm I had unleashed. The press officer assigned to the case shielded me from the worst of it, but fragments still broke through. Grainy photos of Lena, sound bites of outraged politicians, experts debating the ethics of unchecked scientific ambition. The investigating officer had called, confirming the formal charges, the ongoing raids, the discovery of hidden labs. They were finding more than just evidence of Lena's murder. They were uncovering a vast, intricate web of deceit that stretched far beyond Aether Dynamics. The implications were staggering. Sitting by the window, watching the city lights blur into a distant haze, I reflected on it all. The human cost of scientific ambition, unchecked by ethical boundaries, was horrifying. Lena, a brilliant mind, reduced to a casualty in a desperate corporate power play. Her life extinguished for a secret that promised unimaginable destruction. The arrests of the key figures brought a measure of closure, yes. The corporate executive and his accomplices would face justice, but the investigating officer's tone had carried an undertone of unease. "We've cut off the head, Dean," he'd said, "but the body, it's still twitching. This goes deeper than we initially thought." Lena's story was out, her truth finally revealed. But the fallout from Aether Dynamics' ambition would ripple through the world for years to come. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had only just begun to understand its true depth. Months later, the acrid scent of sterile evidence lockers and the metallic tang of dried blood had been replaced by the stale, recycled air of the courthouse. The name Lena had become a refrain, whispered in hushed tones by the press, debated by legal teams, and etched into my memory with the permanence of scar tissue. The immediate battle, as the investigator had put it, was indeed won. But the war for justice had been a drawn-out, draining siege. I sat in the gallery, a silent observer in a suit that felt alien, far removed from my usual lab coat. The lead prosecutor, a woman with a voice like honed steel, laid out the meticulous reconstruction of Lena's final moments, each detail a hammer blow against the defense's carefully constructed facade of accidental death. My reports, the photographs, the microscopic analyses, they were all threads in the tapestry of undeniable fact, woven into the narrative of deliberate malice. The faces of the corporate executives, arrayed before the judge and jury, were a study in calculated composure. The head of research, a man whose ambition had blinded him to humanity, still possessed an unsettling calm, even as the walls closed in. The company's legal counsel, sharp-suited and sharper-tongued, did their best to discredit every piece of evidence, to paint Lena as careless, to dismiss the bioweapons research as a mere theoretical exercise, a tragic misstep. But the sheer volume of material we had unearthed, the digital breadcrumbs leading back to the secret labs and the illicit funding, was overwhelming. The testimony from the whistleblower, a former programmer who had risked everything, solidified the prosecution's case. His voice, quavering but resolute, detailed the internal pressure, the suppressed safety reports, the deliberate sidestepping of regulations in the name of profit and progress. He spoke of the desperate attempts to erase data, to shred documents, to make Lena's death disappear into the corporate ether. I watched the jurors, their expressions a mix of concentration and dawning horror, as the full extent of the conspiracy unfolded before them. The tension in the room was a palpable, suffocating blanket as the jury foreman finally stood, a folded piece of paper clutched in his hand. My breath hitched, a familiar tightness seizing my chest. This wasn't about a victory for me, not truly. It was about Lena, about giving her voice back, about holding those responsible accountable. The word guilty rang out, clear and uncompromising for the head of research and several high-ranking executives on charges ranging from involuntary manslaughter to obstruction of justice. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery, followed by a hushed, almost reverent silence. Justice, a fragile, often elusive concept, had finally echoed in that sterile room. Weeks later, the dust settled. Each server unit glowed with a myriad of green and amber lights, a silent testament to the vast, invisible networks that underpinned our modern world. This was where the digital heart of their operation had been housed, where the true extent of their corporate malfeasance was meticulously archived, bit by bite. I walked slowly down the aisle, the cold air raising goosebumps on my arms. The racks stretched into the distance, a metallic canyon of data. I paused before a specific cluster of servers, their serial numbers matching those I'd seen in the court documents. These were the machines that had held the encrypted files detailing the bioweapons research, the financial ledgers that showed the diverted funds, the internal communications that laid bare the cover-up. It was all here, in this silent, humming mausoleum of information. My fingers brushed against the cool metal of a server casing. The pursuit of truth, I reflected, was rarely clean. It was messy, exhausting, and often left its own kind of residue. Lena's case had scarred me, etched a deeper resolve into my bones. I had seen the lengths to which powerful interests would go to protect their secrets, the ease with which they would sacrifice human life for profit and ambition. My commitment, tempered by the fire of this ordeal, felt stronger, more unyielding than ever. The scent of antiseptic and old paper was a comfort. My desk, usually a battlefield of instruments and reports, was relatively clear. On the corner, however, a new file sat, thick and ominous. Its cover bore a single enigmatic identifier. Case 734B. Unexplained incident. I picked it up, feeling the crisp, untouched paper beneath my fingertips. The pursuit of justice, I knew, was not a singular event, but an ongoing, often lonely battle. And as I opened the file, ready to delve into the next enigma, I knew that somewhere, another echo was waiting to be heard.